6 eggs arrived on the same morning and none of them were supposed to be together. Different types, different temperaments, different everything, and somehow they all hatched within the same hour. By nightfall, they had already sorted out a hierarchy, a territory dispute, and one minor diplomatic incident. By the end of 6 weeks, one of them would do something that made me sit down on the floor. This is what it looks like when the wrong 6 Pokémon become exactly the right team together. The first to hatch was Riolu from a steel blue egg with faint aura markings pulsing across the surface. Small, blue-black upright from the first second, and immediately bowed to the empty incubator around it formally. Nothing was there. It bowed anyway. This would become a pattern that defined every interaction from this point forward. Second was Larvitar, from a dark green egg that had been vibrating aggressively since arrival 2 days prior. Tiny, dark green, dense. It hit the floor of the incubator and immediately tried to eat the thermometer. Third was Miss Drevis, from an egg that had been floating 2 inches above its tray since Tuesday somehow. Purple, wispy around the edges, enormous teal eyes that found the camera immediately and did not look away once. Fourth was Totodile from a blue egg that cracked open sideways and launched the shell across the entire room. Compact, toothy grin, already fully operational, looked at every other hatchling present and snapped its jaw once at each. Fifth was Ralts from a pale green egg so small it had been sitting inside a teacup for warmth. Tiny white body, red horn barely visible, immediately walked to the corner furthest from everyone and sat down quietly. Sixth was Eevee, your egg, your team, your proven Pokémon, fluffy, curious, and already sniffing Riolu's ear. Riolu bowed to Eevee. Eevee looked confused. Larvitar tried to eat Eevee's tail. Day 1 was already something. 6 Pokémon meant 6 habitat zones designed specifically for 6 completely different sets of needs and personalities simultaneously. Riolu's zone, packed dirt training floor, a wooden striking post, open space for movement and aura practice. Larvitar's zone, deep soil substrate it could burrow into, large stones for mineral content, reinforced walls throughout. Miss Drevis's zone, vertical dark space with elevated perches, low light, objects it could move without physical contact somehow. Totodile's zone, deep water section, river rocks, a basking ledge it ignored in favor of staying wet always. Ralts' zone, quiet corner with soft ground cover, a small crystal that caught and scattered light across the space. Eevee's zone, largest open floor space, multiple textures to explore, connected to every other zone by low passageways. The passageways were a mistake. Within 6 hours, Eevee had visited every zone and Larvitar had followed Eevee everywhere. Miss Drevis had phased through 2 walls and was sitting in Ralts' quiet corner observing Ralts at close range silently. Ralts was pretending Miss Drevis was not there. Miss Drevis found this interesting. This dynamic would continue for 6 weeks uninterrupted. Riolu had set up a training routine in its zone and bowed to Totodile every time Totodile passed by. Totodile snapped its jaw at Riolu each time. Riolu bowed again. Totodile snapped again. Neither escalated. Understanding achieved. Food testing happened as a group and immediately revealed 6 completely different personalities through 6 completely different food responses. Riolu approached each food, examined it carefully, bowed to it slightly, then ate with precise, deliberate movements throughout. Larvitar ate everything immediately, including the testing plate, part of the table edge, and a nearby pen accidentally. Miss Drevis floated above the food arrangement and made 3 items disappear without visibly touching any of them at all. Totodile snapped at the fish portion so fast it created a small splash radius, affecting the 2 bowls beside it. Ralts walked past 5 foods without looking, then stopped at the small sweet berry, ate it slowly, returned to corner. Eevee tried everything, rated everything, made strong opinions known about everything. Came back to the berry section 3 additional times. The first outdoor session came in week 2 and the world immediately became significantly more complicated for everyone involved. Riolu bowed to a garden stone it walked past. This is not a metaphor. It bowed to a rock. Larvitar began eating the garden, not exploring it, eating it. Actual soil consumption at a concerning rate and pace. Miss Drevis discovered that sunlight made it partially visible in a way it deeply objected to on personal grounds. Totodile found the garden hose and bit it. Water went everywhere. Totodile looked delighted. Everyone else looked wet. Ralts stood in the center of the garden, completely still for 11 minutes, and nobody could explain what it was doing. Eevee rolled in a flower patch, got pollen on everything, distributed pollen to every other Pokémon through enthusiastic contact. Then the shadow appeared. Something large moving through the tree line at the far end of the garden. A wild Ursaring. Massive, unbothered, and looking at 6 small Pokémon with the expression of something that has nowhere to be. Larvitar walked toward it. I want to be clear. Larvitar walked toward the Ursaring deliberately and with confidence. Ursaring looked at Larvitar the way you look at something too small to fully take seriously yet. Larvitar headbutted Ursaring's shin. Ursaring looked down. Larvitar headbutted it again. Ursaring swatted Larvitar backward 12 inches easily. Larvitar stood back up, looked at Ursaring, looked at its own hands. Something changed in its expression permanently. Meanwhile, Riolu had bowed to Ursaring. Ursaring stared at this. Nobody had ever bowed to Ursaring before, apparently. Miss Dravis appeared directly in front of Ursaring's face. Ursaring roared. Miss Dravis disappeared, appeared behind it. Ursaring spun around confused. Totodile bit Ursaring's ankle. Not hard enough to matter. Hard enough to be extremely annoying to a large bear. Ursaring roared once more at full volume and the entire team scattered in 6 different directions simultaneously and completely. Ursaring walked away. The team reassembled near the garden hose in various states of dignity damage and wet confusion. Riolu bowed to Ursaring's retreating back. Even now, even after that, still bowing to something that had just beaten them. I wrote in my notes, they lost completely and one of them bowed to what beat them. That's actually something. The loss changed the training. All 6 of them. Not just Riolu, not just Larvitar. All 6 simultaneously. Riolu started training before dawn. Striking post, aura exercises, combinations practiced until the movement stopped requiring thought entirely. Larvitar started eating specific mineral-rich stones deliberately. Not random consumption, but targeted geological nutrition for density building. Miss Dravis started practicing speed, appearing and disappearing at increasing frequency until the gaps became too small to track. Totodile started swimming against the habitat current for longer periods, not stopping when tired, but stopping when finished. Ralts started sitting near Miss Dravis voluntarily, still not acknowledging it directly, but closer, 2 feet instead of the entire room. Eevee started sleeping less, started moving between zones more, started watching each teammate train and then training near them. Week 4 brought the first evolution, and it happened during a training session with no drama and no warning. Larvitar was pushing a large stone up a dirt incline in its zone, something it had invented as its own exercise. It stopped, stood very still. Then Pupitar was there, harder and darker and denser than anything the space had held. Did not celebrate, did not look around. Went back to pushing the stone uphill immediately. Just bigger now. Keep going. 3 days later, Totodile bit through the water filter in its zone during a high-speed swim and evolved mid-chomp. Croconaw shook its head, looked at the destroyed filter, looked at me, snapped its jaw once, resumed swimming immediately. Week 5. Miss Dravis evolved at midnight. I checked the camera footage the next morning because I heard nothing at all. One frame Miss Dravis. Next frame Miss Magius, larger and more present and looking directly at the camera with those teal eyes. It had moved every single object in its zone into a different position between midnight and 5 a.m. Every object. Ralts evolved on a quiet afternoon while sitting in its corner doing nothing visible to outside observation whatsoever. Curlia stood up from the same spot, slightly taller, slightly more present, walked to the zone center, sat back down, then looked at Miss Magius directly for the first time in 5 weeks. Miss Magius had been waiting. It did not rush. The crisis arrived from outside the property at the end of week 5 on a night with no warning signs. A Hydreigon, wild, aggressive, too large for residential areas, had been reported moving through the district for 3 days. It found our outdoor sanctuary at 10 p.m., and what it did to the enclosure boundary took 4 seconds total. 6 Pokémon scattered through a destroyed boundary into an uncontrolled outdoor environment in the dark in multiple directions at once. I could track Eevee. I could not track the others. Eevee ran toward the park 2 streets to the left. By the time I got outside, the Hydreigon was already gone, and 5 Pokémon were somewhere in the surrounding neighborhood. I found Croconaw in a residential fountain 3 blocks away, biting the decorative fish sculptures with professional commitment. Miss Magus was found by the sound of every car alarm on one street, activating simultaneously and then going silent. Curlia was sitting in the middle of an intersection, completely still. Cars had stopped around it in all directions somehow. Riolu I did not find. Riolu found me. It walked out of a side street and bowed before I could speak. Then looked behind me. I turned around. Eevee was there. Riolu had been tracking Eevee through the neighborhood alone. Had found it. Had stayed with it. Had walked it back toward me through 3 blocks of unfamiliar dark streets. I wrote in my notes, it bows to everything. But when it mattered, it bowed to nobody and just moved. Pupitar evolved during the walk home. Just started glowing in the middle of the street under the streetlights suddenly. Larvitar had been small enough to sit in your hand. Tyranitar stopped traffic from both directions in the same moment. Enormous, armored, dark green, and ridged, and absolutely nothing about it was negotiable anymore in any sense whatsoever. It looked at me. I looked at it. Then it fell in beside me and we walked the rest of the way home. The final evolution happened the next morning, and I want to describe it correctly, so I will take my time. Riolu had been at the striking post since before dawn. Same as every morning since week 2 without any exception. I watched from inside through the window because this is its private time and I had learned that about it. Then it stopped mid-strike, turned around, bowed to the striking post once. Then the light came from inside it. Lucario stood in the space Riolu had occupied and it stood differently, fuller, more present, more completely itself. Then it turned to the window, looked directly at me through the glass, and bowed once with complete calm certainty. I put my hand flat against the glass. Lucario held its gaze for 3 seconds, then went back to training. Eevee evolved last, exposed to a moonstone. I left in the habitat after dark on the final night. Umbreon arrived in darkness. Dark rings glowing softly. Calmer than Eevee had ever been. Still curious. Just quieter now. Sniffed every teammate. Got snapped at by Feraligatr. Got phased through by Miss Magus. Got bowed to by Lucario formally. The 6 strangers who had nothing in common sat together in the sanctuary the night after the last evolution arrived. Feraligatr in the water section. Tyranitar taking up most of the available land. Miss Magus occupying the air above everyone. Gardevoir sitting beside Miss Magus for the first time, without being observed doing it consciously or needing it to be noted. Umbreon moving between all of them. Still Eevee in the way it moved. Just Umbreon in everything it had become. Lucario standing at the edge of the group, watching the perimeter and bowing once to the dark beyond it quietly. They started as 6 wrong Pokémon on the same morning with nothing between them and no reason to become anything together. They became the team that walked back through a dark neighborhood at 11 p.m., like they had always moved as one. The most unlikely teams are always the ones that survive the things the likely teams never thought to prepare for. Lucario still bows to everything it meets. Tyranitar still eats rocks. Miss Magus still moves objects at midnight without explanation. Some things evolve and some things stay exactly what they were, and somehow both of those things are exactly right.